Hello, friends. This is Anthony from Forest Ghost Conversations. Are you looking to get into the podcast game yourself? Well, if you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, let me tell you, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has some tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Then, when hosting on Anchor, you can even distribute your podcast on listening platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more places. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. And get this, everyone, best of all, Anchor is totally free. Just download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I'm going to discuss the second episode in the Light and Magic documentary titled On the Bucking Bronco. Before we get started, I'm inviting you to join the conversation with us. We can be found on Twitter at Force Ghost Pod. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok just by searching Force Ghost Conversations. Look forward to connecting with you on those platforms. Also, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your listening site of choice. Finally, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it is time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This one being our discussion on Light and Magic Episode 2. If you haven't watched or listened to our Episode 1 discussion, be sure to go check out that one. It's our previous episode from this one, so don't miss out on all the great discussions and conversations that Elise and I, Mrs. Force Ghost Conversations, had about that first episode, which is really fantastic, and it sets the groundwork for a lot of the stuff that is taking place in episode 2. Of course, it's very much a continuation of episode 1. Before we get into the full notes that I've gotten for this episode, I want to do some quick housekeeping things with you. As you noticed in the preamble, we now have a store, a TeePublic store. So guess what? If you've ever been wondering, Anthony, I would like to sport a Force Ghost Conversations t-shirt. I love your logo. Is there a baseball shirt that I can buy with that on there? Or perhaps you want a throw pillow with Force Ghost Conversations on that. Heck, maybe you want a sticker so you can put it on your notebook so you can sport your Force Ghost Conversations pride and share it with your friends when you're at school, if you're still in school. Now you got a chance to do that. Just go to our TeePublic store. It's within the show notes for this, or if you are on our social media channels, it's all over that. Be sure to check it out, see all the offerings that are available to you, and go ahead and sport your pride. We would really appreciate it. It goes to help out the show, and that's really all I got for that one. So yeah, go check it out, see if you like it. I hope to have you or hope to see you around wearing some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. Hopefully at the next celebration that I'm able to go to. Not planning on going to London this year. Hopefully at the next convention I get to see some people wear some Force Ghost Conversations merch. Maybe we do a meetup. I'm sure there's a Denny's close by or an IHOP. We just do some all-you-can-eat pancakes or something like that, or waffles, and have a good time. That would be fun. We'd love to think of some creative ideas by which we could do a meet and greet and have a fun time together as a Star Wars loving community. That's really what it is. So that's topic number 1 that I wanted to get on to there. So that's as I'm trying to move away from this topic, but if I can add one more bit to it. So as you will notice, we are very close to our 50th episode. We're going to get there super fast, and there is yet one more surprise for the 50th anniversary, 50th episode of Force Ghost Conversations. We did the Willow inspired logo, which we will do or utilize for our Willow content in support of that, which will really hype up in October, November-ish. We just launched our store, which is number 2, and then number 3 is really special. I think you're going to really like it at home. So get ready for that. It's just around the corner. Just be patient just a little bit longer for us on that one. All right? Now I got to remember what was what the other thing I wanted to talk about. Okay. So as typical, there is no Cloud City Gossip during this portion of the episode. Since this is a midweek episode, it will be on our Sunday episode. So if you're looking for all the breaking news that's taken place in Star Wars Galaxy over the last week, check out our show on Sunday. That's where that will be. But I do have a bit of Star Wars adventure and activity, something, if you will, that I'm really proud to get to partake in, and I hope that you all have the chance to as well in your neck of the woods, as I was very surprised to see that my local IMAX theater actually is now showing the re-release of Rogue One in IMAX with a special Andor first look footage. And very, very fortunate to find that out yesterday. So I went and had grabbed myself and Mrs. Force Goes Conversations tickets. So I'm really thrilled to be able to see Rogue One again in the cinema, let alone in the IMAX format, which is incredible. It's where I saw it my first time in 2016 on opening night. So I hope that you all get a chance to see that as well. Be sure to look up go to IMAX.com and search your zip code. Of course, that's one way to start. Go to Fandango and look for areas around your neighborhood. If you got a local AMC or a Regal, check their apps and all that. I'm sure you'll be able to find some place close by that will handle all that for you. So that's really all of the housekeeping items there. I just wanted to share that because I'm really excited about that. It'll be this Friday for me at the time of the release of this episode that I get to go see that again. And there will be an upcoming Force Ghost Conversations episode, of course, discussing that experience. And I am pretty confident that Mrs. Force Ghost Conversations, Elise King, will also be able to join on that show to discuss the wonderful things that has happened in that movie. All right, everybody. I'm beyond all that now. I've gone through all of the housekeeping items. We're ready to go. It's time to dive into Light and Magic episode 2 on the Bucking Bronco. That's an interesting title. I mean, be careful how you say it. This is a family friendly show, of course. It means they're along for the ride, right? You're moving forward, which is why the Broncos moving forward, but it's bucking. It's back in place. It's going all over the place. You don't know where you're going to land, if you're going to fall off. You're holding on for dear life, and it's a little bit of a stressful time here. Obviously, we left on that great cliffhanger that George Lucas had in the end of episode 1. Let me also preface this all before I really dive into this again. Spoilers for Light and Magic episode 2 on the Bucking Bronco from here on out. If you haven't watched the episode, pause this now, go watch it on Disney Plus, then come back. Might as well watch the rest of Light and Magic while you're at it too, because otherwise you're going to be sorely out of luck for the rest of this series that we're doing here on Force Ghost Conversations. Just letting you all know, you're warned from here on out. Everything is spoiler territory for, I guess, both episode 1 and episode 2 at this point. So I may touch on some of that stuff, especially in the beginning here, where it's continuing that discussion that George was having, where he's like, I was not happy. They'd spent half the budget already, John Dykstra and team at ILM, on the special effects and really getting the foundation and tech together, which they were creating new tech out of literally nowhere. And it makes sense why they had to spend so much money and time creating the foundation for this all. But they put themselves in a time crunch. They had to get themselves back on track and on schedule and on budget in order to get to the finish line that is May 1977 for Star Wars. But I will tell you, this is a really great start to an episode. It starts off with George, basically a mini biography. This is a really, really well done biography about young George Lucas's life, which really you don't get a whole lot of. Now, I am fortunate enough that I've read this great book. I'm trying to look it up now. I'm so sorry. I should have pulled it up ahead of time. It's called George Lucas: A Life by Brian J. Jones. And I listened to the audiobook of this Really, really insightful story. A couple years ago, just before the pandemic, I got it on audiobook and I listened to it all. And I think it's really worth a re-listen again. I may have to do that just to get some important facts so I can share it on the show with you all. But it's really, really well done. I highly recommend checking it out, whether in print form, digital, or via audiobook. That is a really, really well done story about George Lucas and the life that he has had. It really explains about a lot about this early years. So none of this was really new or groundbreaking to me. I was kind of expecting it. But for example, Elise, my wife, she was, she knows about George Lucas, but not about his early career and the accident, his rift with his dad, and his struggle to really find who he was as a person, his love of cars and all that stuff, right? That is not necessarily stuff you get on the surface level when you talk or see stuff about George Lucas. The book also does a really, really wonderful job of explaining like the post Star Wars 90s era for George, where the willow of it all, if you will, which I think is a really great time. The Indiana Jones films of the 80s, working on Labyrinth, and then rewrite, or I guess not rewriting, but actually sitting down to write the prequel trilogy. That is a really great segment of the book there. So I'm not going to spoil a whole lot of it for you, but it's really insightful, I think, to understanding George and the prequels and just everything that's really going on in the mind of George Lucas. But again, check that out if you want some more details and insight. But overall, I would say that this intro is really, really, really great. It's always good to cool, and I would say to learn more about the creator. He says, especially after there's that car accident, that it's really great. Maybe there's a reason that I'm here, and I agree. Like, maybe if you want to get into fate and all that stuff and destiny, like there's clearly a path forward for George Lucas here. That he survived that accident for a good reason, I would say, to leave us with this wonderful mythological world and canon that he's created via Star Wars and his other films, of course, that he's been a part of, and just all the tech that has really come across because of his ideas, innovation, and pushing for more creativity, which we'll get to in later episodes, of course. Something that I found really great about this episode too overall is that you get to see a lot of great young pictures of young George, like especially George with the long hair. Like that's a great look. Love seeing young pictures of him smiling and all that stuff. It's really a side of him that you never really get to see too often, especially of his younger days. And I love that he's so complimentary of those texts that really inspired him, the mythological texts that really got him to where we are today. Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces, of course. Like I have a copy of that right beside my bed, so I fall asleep every night seeing that book beside me. So I know the roots of everything that it's really inspired me, and it's right there. George was clearly a fan of myths and the foundations of a society and what makes society, and it's really what is myth, right? Myth is the foundation of society. It's the stories that keep us going. It's the stories that give us our ethos. It's our national heritage, right? So those are the foundation of what makes a society, and that's interesting that George has stuck on that and really what makes society. And that's what we get with Star Wars eventually later on. Something that's really, really, really cool, and I think it's really neat about George's friend group, I will say too, is like if you study like J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, they were part of a group called the Inklings, where they kind of met they were all Oxford or related Oxford professors or visiting professors or just friends in the area that were writing these like fantasy-based books. It's kind of centered around Christianity, some not, right, of course, and they just every so often got together at their local pub and had meetings and shared scripts and notes with each other and draft writings, and that's really great. It was really an inspiring, I would say, era for that group, and really led to some excellent pieces of literature. Similarly, it seems like Lucas had a similar model, if you will, of all of the people in his life that were his close friends, right? Steven Spielberg, Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Brian De Palma, to name a few. Robert Zemeckis also, right? George's friends that wanted to share their films, right? We'll talk later about this rough cut of Star Wars that they got to see, and Spielberg knew right then and there, like, this is some brilliance, some genius right here. He saw the 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 escape pod that jettisons out in New Hope, one of the early special effects shots that they did in ILM. And he said he knew right then and there that this was going to be an epic picture. So George's first film, it's his student film that he expanded later on, THX 1138. It's a pretty good movie. I like it a lot. A little out there, a little avant-garde, of course. And he was dared to do a comedy by his friend Francis Ford Coppola. He said, "I dare you to make a comedy, make me laugh in a way." And he said, "All right, betcha." And that product is American Graffiti, starring none other than who eventually becomes one of a really powerhouse set of directors is Ron Howard. And he applauds George for being a world builder and thinking differently than other directors. And after the experience on American Graffiti, which is a fantastic film, I would highly recommend checking it out if you're a fan of drag racing cars, 1950s culture, what have you. It's all there. It's George's childhood, basically, and the things that he really enjoyed in a nutshell. But Ron asked George, "What do you want to do next?" And George goes, "I like science fiction. This Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon movie serial, but the ships go fast." And something that's always fascinated me about Star Wars is like, these are the talking points. Even 50 years later, George has always stuck to what is Star Wars in a nutshell. He's like, oh, it's this Buck Rogers kind of Flash Gordon-esque movie matinee serial from the 1950s. All right. I'm sure if you were to ask him today, you would say the same thing. If you were to ask him 20 years ago, it'd be the same script. If you were to ask him 50 years ago, it's the same deal. It's this Buck Rogers Flash Gordon movie serial. I love how it's described. I mean, that's exactly how Star Wars is in a nutshell. But it also has this era essence, if you will, of modern mythology. It's science fiction that is aimed at young people. And frankly, maybe not even science fiction. It's space fantasy is the appropriate way. It's a space opera of this family out in space, dealing with these adventures and making choices that affect the galaxy and both themselves. Now, I will say, thank goodness for Ralph McQuarrie. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Star Wars without him. As it's noted in this episode, Ralph is another set of special glue that made Star Wars happen. Without his concept artwork, we wouldn't have Star Wars, because if it wasn't for that concept artwork that put George's vision to light, I don't know if Alan Ladd Jr. and the executives at Fox would have really moved forward with this project in the way that they did and gave George the free will, reign creativity that he really had. Fox, of course, was not interested in building a special effects company either. That was purely for Star Wars. So George had to set it up himself, which is eventually what became ILM with his own money that he earned from American Graffiti. And this sets forth a key theme that will be prevalent in the rest of George Lucas's story, and definitely the ILM story. It's this personal investment in the group at ILM that continues to grow. It grew from the small shop in Van Nuys near the airport to up at San Francisco, where there's currently the ILM headquarters. They also have headquarters, I believe, in Vancouver and Singapore, I think, too. So that's excellent. Excellent. I always got to see when people want to invest in themselves and the people around them. So nothing new also with the story of Star Wars is the fact that just about nothing went right. Nothing went right. The Tunisia suite. The shooting in Tunisia, the Star Wars filming process, let me get that right, taking place in Tunisia, did not go well at all. The weather was never cooperative. The sets were breaking down. The work in London also didn't go so great at Pinewood. The unions were a big thing back then, that they couldn't work past 5 o'clock, and overtime wasn't a thing. So they were down to a crunch to get this under the wire. And that's kind of really sets the foundation for where George is going back to Los Angeles to check in on ILM, right? He wanted to see how the special effects project is going and hope that that'll really brighten his mood. George has always said that persistence is the key to making movies, as he alluded to and again in the episode. You've got to be persistent under impossible conditions. So George had not a great experience when he got back to ILM. There were, again, less than a year to do the special effects. They'd already spent $1 million, which is half their budget, and they only had a few bits of footage. So I love that story that they shared of Ken Ralston, the poor Ken Ralston, who was caught in the middle of this heated argument between George and John, where George is like, "What have you been doing? What are you doing, man? You spent half the budget." And of course, George, he's under a big stress, a big amount of stress. And John almost got fired, of course, but I guess they were too far along in the process, and he was able to convince them that just, give us some more time. We're almost there. They were building the equipment and the miniatures, and it took 18 hours a day, as they noted, in order to keep doing that. Like, it's daunting. They were creating stuff out of nothing. They were trying to create this vision that they had. I mean, it's really fascinating stuff, if you ask me. So George famously almost has a heart attack from the stress. It's called angina, and everyone was really worried about George, that he was going to be able to get there. But eventually, he pulls it together, and he helps really ILM by being there more often while he's doing editing too, get to where we see the effects in A New Hope. And I talked about this earlier. That they show that rough cut, right? George shows that rough cut of Star Wars with minimal, like just 2 special effects shots, really rough, tattered. I've heard the story is all over the place, and the pacing isn't exactly where it is. And he showed it to his friends, Spielberg being one of them in the room. And although they were having a good laugh at it, Steven Spielberg personally saw the genius that was coming down the line, and he had the foresight eventually that others would jump on board with. But also, I think Steven Spielberg saw the genius at the ILM that was taking place, and he's gonna have a role in this story yet to tell later on. So get ready for some more Steven Spielberg. As George alluded to as the title in the episode, he was on the bucking bronco and he had to get going. But frankly, they were really lacking what we would call in today's modern world project management. How do they keep track of anything? And here comes Rose Dugnan. Duignan? I'm going to say Duignan and hope that's that. Please don't, I'm trying my best, Rose. I'm sorry. I should have looked this up ahead of time. I'm so sorry. I hope I'm getting that right. Rose Duignan. We'll just call her Rose. She was following George and John Dykstra around, keeping notes on all the actions, choices, and the deadlines. And frankly, they were right in saying that an adult was needed in the room. George Mather was also in the room to help bring into order, but I love how complimentary they were with Rose and how important she is to the overall ILM story. It's also great that we have like a female presence in the room too, as you could tell from the first episode, ILM was very much, at least what was presented, heavily male dominated. And it's great to see more representation and equality across the board here. So finally, with Rose and George being brought in to really help bring some sense to all this stuff, the work was becoming more successful, especially now that the groundwork had been set. They had systems created that was a wonderful way of moving the tech and of filmmaking even further, right? We talked about the Dykstra moving camera that was really brought into place in the first episode. And they spent a lot of time in the episode on that opening sequence of Star Wars, right? It's the blockade runner being tracked down by the Star Destroyer. The Star Destroyer, obviously, in the final shot, has the scale and the magnificence to it, and that they really needed that. It needed to pop. So what they did, which is really neat, is they got the blockade runner that's about the size of a cigarette, and they flipped the Star Destroyer model upside down. This was so cool in the documentary, if you ask me. They got the lens so close to the Star Destroyer that it scraped it several times. And can you believe how close they were? Like, that's incredible. What an amazing effect that feels like it never ends, right? That's always my thought when I see that first image of the Star Wars film, A New Hope, is that never-ending Star Destroyer. You feel like you're really being weighed down by the daunting oppression of the Empire. And it was precisely what George wanted. They got the entire ship in focus, and it helps to establish scale. And also, they have human scale to things to make it really effective as well, such as like doors and windows, as John was discussing, and that makes it like artistry. It's really a gift that have given us with this image. Like you can see all the stuff in the model when it's flying overhead. It gives it scale to trick your mind into perspective. It's awesome. I also, when they kind of got into groove there, they played that wonderful version of Beethoven's Fifth. I'm sorry, I don't know who does it, but it's like this funky disco-esque version. It's clearly of the 70s. If you've seen the movie Semi-Pro, it's the song that they also play when they learn the alley-oop. It's incredible. I love it. It's great that it was brought in at just the right time. I think I'm going to look it up after I'm done recording here just to listen and jam out to it again. I also really appreciate that George eventually realized that he had to get involved too, and it was in the nitty-gritty of it all. He said that they can reuse shots. They gotta think outside the box. I don't care if you just put it on a stick and put some light and put some stars behind it. We got to get these done. They were under a time crunch. And frankly, it's just amazing that with the budget constraints, the new tech that they created, the fact that no one else really was doing what they were doing, that they got it all underway by May 1977. It's great. And I believe, I don't know if George said this or if it was Dykstra, but someone said to the extent of, to work in visual effects, you have to be crazy. You have to be a little nuts. Nothing was sacred at this point, right? There wasn't this mythos of what Star Wars is that people were nervous about potentially ruining the canon or the atmosphere of what is Star Wars. They were like, just get it built and put it in front of a camera. But they all seem to have fun at the end of the day, and that's really what you want out of this workplace culture, right? Even though they did feel the crunch of the deadline and George being a perfectionist, he didn't take everyone's work for what it was. He made them redo things, do changes. He asked for feedback. It's great. Another thing that they talked about a lot in the episode is the stop motion for Holochess, right? Phil Tippett and John Berg too did a great job putting together this thing, and I liked how they noted that originally they were going to do that sequence like actual actors, but because of the other film that did it before, they needed to do something different to create it original and make it unique to Star Wars. So they got 10 stop motion aliens that were created within 2 weeks, and Phil Tippett and both John Berg can really do anything when they put their minds to it. And that really is the epic thing that is that holochess scene that I will always understand the incredible work that has been put into it now. Again, let me talk about how great these behind the scenes images were for this series, right? Seeing George at a young age in the middle of all this, seeing John, Rose, all of them just having an incredible time. And can you believe that the studio was threatening at one point to eliminate the Death Star sequence? I'm glad that George fought for it, because without that, Star Wars isn't really there. It's the chase. The chase has to be built. Chase is the foundation of cinema, right? As they discussed in depth there. Seeing the Death Star trenches being built was an incredible sequence too. And the fact that they had to put, a camera on a car and drive it right amount of speed, 15 and 20 miles an hour or so, in order to set off an explosion and get that effect in for the film. These guys and gals were scrappy. They were doing everything they needed to in order to get the work done that they needed to. And even to the smallest detail, right? They still cared about what they were doing. A reflective tape to get the lights in the Death Star. As Rose said, we were the Rebel Alliance. It's incredible. It was a job, and they didn't really know what they were doing up until then, but then Star Wars came out, and then afterwards, they were like rock stars. And personally, to me, they are like rock stars. You see the joy that people had in putting the work together at the end of the day. And there's something that's very appealing about Star Wars to everybody. It's that mythos that is the innate in all of us, right? It's that hero with 1,000 faces that we're all able to connect to one of these characters in some way, shape, or form. We see ourselves in this galaxy far, far away, and we all have these experiences of wanting to be on that adventure when we're on the precipice of being a 12-year-old looking out to the twin suns. These are Academy Award-winning special effects, and everyone pitched in and got the job done. George could see through the magic, though. So this is a man that's always going to be pushing the bounds of what is and what isn't cinema. This is clear. George could see the duct tape, putting it all together. Frankly, That's why he comes back 20 years from now, or at this point in time, from 1977 to 1997. He does the special editions, what we're now celebrating 25 years of this year. It's incredible that we're already at 25 years for the special editions. But we do the special editions longer than we do the original Star Wars. Even then, George did his Blu-rays, and he's in the 4K release. He's still tinkering with Star Wars. I don't think he'll ever be truly satisfied. He may be now that he's not fully involved in the production process at all. So that's why he came back together. But there's that something in George that's always like, I'm sure there's a better way to do this. There's got to be a way to be more efficient. And maybe I got to figure out what that is. And that's the cliffhanger for this episode. No, they got some work to do. Clearly, they got some sequels coming up. They're going to start doing other work for other movies. They're going to keep pushing the bounds of what it is to be a special effects house. And they're going to do it all. They're going to be involved in a lot of films coming up, and it's going to be an exciting time. So I thank you all for listening to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. Be sure to check us out on all of our social media channels to continue the conversation about light and magic. I hope you are all enjoying it as much as I am. It's incredible to really see the work that all these people do, and I'm glad that their stories are being told in this format and being brought to light. Light and magic, of course, too. So with that, everybody, we'll be back later on this week with a brand new episode about something in the Star Wars galaxy. Get ready for that. Of course, the 50th episode is just around the corner, too, so get ready for one more special surprise on top of all that. But until then, I hope that you all have a fantastic remainder of your week. May the Force be with you. Take care.